it's okay to make mistakes. To anybody listening or watching, there's nothing wrong with it. Just do everything you can not to make the same mistakes twice.
Is that a segue into your marketing fuck up?
Oh God, I made it sound. It's always like to focus on.
I was going to save it till later on, but I thought
the TEDx was interesting. The TEDx story that you've spoken at TEDx. Where was that, and how did it go?
It took place in Northern Ireland. I wasn't aware that the guy who was arranging the TEDx was in the audience. So I ran I moved back to Northern Ireland. So I had a great career in London. I loved working in London, and I worked around the world for 5 years running shipping events. And so I had a chance to sell in the USA and Canada and Germany, Middle East and Asia. And I learned so much about people and cultures and body language and how every country is so different. And it really made me very good at those 5 years. I kind of really excelled as a salesperson. And unfortunately, when I set my own business up, because I wasn't very happy with just, working 5 days a week, commuting all the time, I wanted to work from home. No boss would let me work from home before lockdown. Nobody. They kept saying, good salespeople do not work from home. Only lazy people do, which, by the way, I've never agreed with that philosophy, but that's what a lot of people used to believe. And also my daughter was doing her A-levels and I wanted to be present more as a father, and I just got frustrated. So I wrote a book called Everybody Works in Sales. It became a huge bestseller. But obviously I worked on it day and night to make sure it did become a bestseller. It's very important to anybody listening. You know that. But unfortunately then my daughter went to university and I went through a horrendous divorce with my ex-wife. And that was bloody and brutal and lasted over a year. And that did affect my work in quite a big way. And then 2 months after the divorce happened, lockdown happened. And the government gave me nothing. There was no furlough. And I was living off bounce back loans and credit cards. Now, when you're a man, you're late 40s and you have no job. You have no purpose in life. You have no income. You have no partner. Life becomes very dangerous very quickly. Luckily, I don't do drugs or porn or gambling, any of the dangerous things a lot of men do, which I'm grateful for. But I kind of went from 14 stone to 21. So I kind of ate my feelings and became very sick very quickly. And my parents, God bless them both. Really, I wouldn't be here without my parents. And I'm very open about that. Said, right, put everything in storage right now. You're coming back home. And I said, Dad, I can't come back home. And I procrastinated a few more weeks until finally I couldn't take it anymore. So I moved back to Northern Ireland, a really awful, vile, narrow-minded town where I grew up. I went back and it was horrific. It was embarrassing and it was shameful. And it took me a year to rebuild my life and rebuild my mental health. And when I did that, I was surprised how difficult it was to find business in Northern Ireland. I thought I've got all this experience and knowledge, got a best-selling book. Nobody cared. And so I ended up partnering with two guys locally, Jim Irving and Collie Graham, and we ran 3 major events in 18 months on sales and marketing. And that's what kind of got the attention of people again. Live events, because people were really scared about doing live events after COVID. I was on it straight away because I had no other income. And it was the second event I think I did. A member of the TEDx community was there. I didn't know this. And he said, you managed to talk about email in a way that was actually interesting. And you were actually charismatic and you made people laugh. It was email, it's the most boring subject around. Have you thought of doing a TED Talk? I said, I'd love to do a TED Talk about sales because we need to raise the standard. He goes, no, that's boring. That's too boring. I want to talk about your story of failure and how you lost everything and you rebuilt your life through vulnerability and kindness. And I went, okay, I'll do that. And that was my TED Talk. And that's how the TED Talk came about.
That is very brave. And then also a TED Talk, for those of you who have never seen it before, you've got like a spot, right? You've got to go out and stand on the spot. And most people don't even have, I don't know, I've not done it. I've presented a lot of things, but I imagine it's pretty terrifying. And you have, was it being filmed as well, live?
It was being filmed. And the problem is you can't move from the spot. You're stuck there. And, because I spent sort of 2 years going to Professional Speakers Association and speaking courses, you're taught to move from the stage. And all of a sudden I had to unlearn everything I'd been taught just for this one event. And it's so difficult not to move for 15 minutes. It's so difficult. And you can't interact with an audience because all my sales training, my LinkedIn training, it's interactive. but you cannot talk to the audience. And so you have to unlearn everything. And it was incredibly difficult. But you know what? I was incredibly proud of that moment. I'm incredibly proud how I opened up my heart. I looked at all other speakers and thought, okay, they're all using slides. I'm going to do this without slides, which made it more daring and more different. And at the end of the evening, people were queuing at the door to speak to me, which I thought, this is amazing. This is the greatest moment of my career so far. This is going to take off like Simon Sinek or Mel Robbins in a huge way. And then when the TED Talk came out a few months later, all the speakers did very well, 20,000, 30,000 views. And I got 2,000 views and I was devastated. I was just heartbroken. It just didn't take off. People just didn't care. I mean, a few of my clients saw it, a few former clients saw it, a few friends watched it and said, well done. But nobody cared. And that was hard to accept at the time. But at the same time, it's a very good talk. And about 8 months later, a beauty therapist who was building her business in Belfast and scaling quite quickly went, that talk was amazing. Can I hire you for sales training? So that's a good example of thinking long-term in sales. For 8 months, all the other speakers were getting so much work. And I'm like, nobody was even talking to me.
The credibility of being associated with TEDx, though, irrespective of you. I mean, we'll have to share the video link in the show notes, actually, because I'm sure people will be listening to this wanting to.
Thank you. But yeah, it's a good example of A, thinking long-term, and B, in sales, sometimes, not just in sales, but in life, you do good work, but it doesn't get recognized until a long time later. The best example, I think, in the movie world is probably, It's a Wonderful Life. Nobody really cared about it when it came out, but 20 years later, it was shown on TV, it became huge. Shawshank Redemption, one of the greatest movies of all time, came out, complete flop. But then several months later, it came out and, at the time VHS, and everybody talked about it. It took off. And sometimes that just happens. And the amount of work I've now had for my TED Talk years later, people just going, oh my God, that was amazing talk. Can you speak at our conference? But it took years. It didn't happen instantly.
Why do you think it didn't take off then? Because the others did and yours didn't. What's the magic? If there's like people listening to this, they're thinking, what can I learn from that? Why did the others, I suppose, why did they take off and yours has just kept going, but slower, but at least you've had one piece of business out of it. Anyway, that's good.
I had one piece of sales training out of it, which was lovely. And then I've spoken at conferences 2 years later. People then hired me, but that was 2 years later. I think I spoke about vulnerability. When you think of vulnerability in TEDx, you think of Brene Brown, who is truly smart, exceptional, talented, groundbreaking, probably the best in her field, or I should say the best known in her field. So you can't compare yourself to that, but it's like if somebody did a talk about your why, they're always going to compare you to Simon Sinek no matter what, Brene's talk was just so much better than mine. And I think, second of all, I was fundraising for November. So I looked like a Mexican bandit. I mean, I did. I had this ridiculous mustache. I just looked ridiculous. Yeah. And it's almost, and I actually mentioned in my talk, I'm raising money for November, just so you're aware. I don't normally look like this, but I look at myself thinking, God, that mustache it's a handlebar mustache. I look ridiculous. And that's probably the first time people have seen me speak and they're thinking, this guy just, what's going on there,